I was sold by my parents for being infertile and forced to wed a widowed lumberjack with 4 kids, until a hidden truth turned their fate upside down. I built a family instead of a grudge, finding freedom in forgiving those who sold me. Now I want to ask you, in the end, am I the asshole or not? I'll never forget that cold winter day when my father, Ernest Garcia, looked me in the eyes and said, "Carmen, we've arranged everything. You'll marry Mr. Alexander. He needs a woman to take care of his ranch and his 4 children." I was barely 20 years old when I learned that my parents had received money in exchange for handing me over to a man I didn't even know. The reason was simple and devastating. 3 months earlier, the town doctor had diagnosed me with infertility. For my traditional family from rural Texas, a woman incapable of having children lacked value, and my parents, taking advantage of the most painful betrayal, decided to get rid of me. I felt the icy air cutting my face as I walked with my mother toward the small-town church. My dress wasn't white but dark gray, like the sky that threatened a storm. My face was a mask of dignity that hid the humiliation I felt. The townspeople whispered as they saw me pass. "There goes the barren one. Poor Mr. Alexander, having to bear with a woman like that." Each word was like a needle piercing my soul. My mother walked upright, almost proud. "You should be grateful," she had told me that morning while helping me dress. "A man like Mr. Alexander accepting a defective woman like you. Many would want your luck." Luck? Was it luck to be sold like cattle? Was it luck that your own family betrayed you this way? I didn't respond. The tears I had shed in secret during the past weeks had dried up, leaving only emptiness in my chest. The family drama I was living had become entertainment for the entire town. The ceremony was brief and cold. Mr. Alexander Mendoza, a man of almost 40 years, widowed with 4 children, looked at me with an indecipherable expression. He wasn't handsome, but he wasn't unpleasant either. His calloused hands and sun-weathered skin spoke of a life of hard work in the forests. He was a lumberjack and carpenter, owner of a small ranch on the outskirts of town. He didn't smile when the priest declared us husband and wife. He simply nodded, like someone closing a business deal, which, in essence, was what he had done with my parents. "Let's go," was the only word he addressed to me after the ceremony. There was no celebration, no hugs, no good wishes. My parents received an envelope from his hand, which my father quickly tucked into his jacket pocket. The humiliation was complete when I saw my mother discreetly counting the bills while I climbed into Mr. Alexander's rundown truck. They didn't even say goodbye when I left. For them, I had ceased to exist. The journey to the ranch was silent. The dirt roads made the vehicle bounce, and I held onto the seat to keep from falling. I looked out the window at the arid landscape and the pine forests in the distance, wondering what would become of me now. "The children will be waiting," he finally said, breaking the silence. "The oldest is 12, the youngest barely 4. Their mother died 2 years ago." I nodded without saying anything. At least now I knew what I was facing. The ranch was modest but well-maintained, a 2-story wooden house with a large yard where logs and tools were stacked. 4 children waited at the entrance, perfectly lined up by height. Their serious faces examined me when I got out of the truck. The oldest, a boy with dark eyes and a furrowed brow, looked at me with evident disdain. The youngest, a girl with large brown eyes, seemed scared. My heart sank. They too were victims of this situation. "Children, this is Carmen, your new mother," said Mr. Alexander with a firm voice. "You will treat her with respect." He said nothing about loving me or accepting me, just respect. It was more than I had expected. The children nodded in silence except the oldest, who spat on the ground before turning around and entering the house. Mr. Alexander said nothing, but I saw how he clenched his jaw. "I'll show you the house," he said, guiding me inside. It was simple but clean. A large kitchen, a living room with worn but comfortable furniture, and upstairs, 4 bedrooms. "This is yours," he said, pointing to a small room with a single bed. "I sleep on the other side of the hallway. The children share the other 2. I was surprised. I had expected he would want to consummate the marriage immediately. As if reading my thoughts, he added, "I didn't bring you here for that. I need someone to take care of my children and the house while I work. If in time you want to be a true wife, we'll talk. If not, I'll respect your space." That night, while unpacking my few belongings, I heard the muffled crying of the little one in the adjoining room. Without thinking, I went out to the hallway and gently opened her door. The girl was startled to see me, quickly wiping away her tears. "Are you okay?" I asked, staying in the doorway. She shook her head. "I miss my mama," she said with a broken voice. "And now you're here but you're not her." Her honesty disarmed me. "No," I replied. "I'm not her and I'll never pretend to be. But if you let me, I can be your friend." She looked at me with distrust but nodded slightly. Thus began my life at the Mendoza Ranch, sold by my family, rejected by my new stepchildren, and married to a stranger. I didn't know then that this betrayal would become the beginning of a story that would change my life forever. The first days at the ranch were hell disguised as purgatory. Michael, Mr. Alexander's oldest son, made sure to make me feel like an intruder at every moment. "My mother made better food," he said when I served lunch. "My mother kept the house cleaner," he commented when I swept. The constant humiliation reminded me of my family home, where I was never enough because of my condition. Every night, exhausted physically and emotionally, I locked myself in my small room and cried silently. Mr. Alexander was barely at home. He left before dawn and returned when the sun had already set. He was a man of few words but observant. One night, while we dined in silence, interrupted only by the noise of cutlery and Michael's occasional contemptuous comments, Mr. Alexander hit the table with his fist. Enough, Michael. Carmen is doing the best she can. She's not your mother. She never pretended to be, but she's here taking care of you and your siblings when she could have turned her back on us. You owe her respect. The family drama unfolding at that table left everyone paralyzed. Michael, with tears of rage in his eyes, got up abruptly and ran out. His siblings looked at their plates, uncomfortable. Mr. Alexander sighed deeply. I'm sorry, Carmen. He lost his mother too young. It's hard for him to accept change. It was the first time I saw vulnerability in him. That night, while washing dishes, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Anna, the 4-year-old, holding a drawing. It's for you, she said shyly, handing me a paper full of colorful scribbles. It's you and me, picking flowers. My heart melted instantly. I crouched down to her level and hugged her tightly, feeling how a small crack opened in the wall of ice that surrounded my heart. The routine began to establish itself. I got up before everyone to prepare breakfast, helped the children get dressed for school, cleaned the house, tended the small backyard garden, prepared meals, and waited for everyone's return in the afternoon. James and Paul, the middle sons of 8 and 6 years old, gradually began to accept me. They asked for help with their homework and sometimes told me about their adventures at school. Anna became my shadow, following me throughout the house. Only Michael maintained his barrier of hostility, although his comments had become less frequent. One day, while hanging laundry, I heard a desperate scream from the nearby forest. It was a child's voice. Without thinking, I ran toward the sound, finding Michael hanging precariously from a tree, his leg trapped between 2 branches. There was blood staining his pants. "Help me!" he screamed when he saw me, fear overcoming his pride. With my heart beating furiously, I climbed the tree, ignoring the scratches from the bark on my arms. I managed to reach him and carefully freed his leg. I carried him on my back, surprised by my own strength, and brought him back to the house while cleaning and bandaging his wound. He remained silent, but his gaze had changed. "Thank you," he finally murmured without looking at me directly. "Don't tell Dad I was playing in the forest alone. He forbids it." It was the first time he asked me for something as an ally, not as an enemy. I nodded, sealing our small secret. That day, something changed between us. The betrayal by my family remained an open wound, but I found comfort in the ranch routine and in the small moments with the children. Mr. Alexander and I barely spoke, but our coexistence had become comfortable. He returned exhausted from work, and I served him dinner in silence. Sometimes our gazes crossed for an instant longer than necessary, and I felt a strange warmth in my chest that I hurried to ignore. One afternoon, while the children played in the yard, Mr. Alexander arrived early, accompanied by a woman, tall, elegant, with a face that reflected kindness and warmth. She introduced herself as Mrs. Louise, the school teacher. "Carmen, Mrs. Louise has come to talk to you," said Mr. Alexander, with an expression I couldn't decipher. "The children have improved, remarkably, since you arrived," commented Mrs. Louise, accepting the coffee I offered her. "Especially Michael. His behavior in class has changed completely." The pride I felt was unexpected. I hadn't realized how much these children mattered to me until that moment. "But I haven't come just for that," continued the teacher. "Alexander has told me about your situation, how you came here. The shame immediately invaded me. Did the whole town know how I had been sold? How my parents had discarded me for being defective?" "I don't judge," she clarified quickly, as if reading my mind. "On the contrary, I admire your strength, and I'd like to offer you something. I'm looking for an assistant at the school, someone to help me with the little ones." I thought of you. I was speechless. Me, working at the school, having my own money, my own independence. "But the children, the house," I stammered, looking at Mr. Alexander. "The children are at school most of the day," he replied with a slight smile. "And the house can wait. I didn't bring you here to turn you into a prisoner." "Carmen." It was the first time he used my name with such softness. Something stirred inside me. I accepted Mrs. Louise's offer without imagining how this small act of independence would alter the course of my life. 2 weeks later, while walking to school for my first day, a cart stopped beside me. I froze, recognizing its occupants, my parents. "Carmen," my mother called me, as if we had a normal relationship, as if she hadn't sold me just 3 months ago. "We need to talk to you. It's urgent." My father had a somber face. Both seemed to have aged years in these months. "Your sister is sick," my mother continued. "Very sick. The doctors say she needs expensive treatment. We hoped you could talk to your husband. Ask for a loan." The audacity left me breathless. After selling me like cattle, were they coming to ask me for money? The family drama was reaching new heights of hypocrisy. "My sister?" I asked with a trembling voice. "The same one who mocked me when she found out I was infertile, the one who said no man would ever want me?" My mother had the decency to lower her gaze. My father, however, maintained his authoritarian attitude. "We're your family, Carmen, despite everything." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Family? You sold me. You treated me like defective merchandise. The only family I have now lives at the Mendoza Ranch." With those words, I continued on my way, feeling their gazes fixed on my back. I didn't know then that this encounter would be the first of many, nor that the revenge life had prepared for them would be more perfect than I could ever plan. Working at the school transformed my life. Mrs. Louise not only taught me to be a teacher, but became the friend I never had. With each passing day, my confidence grew. The town children loved me, respected me. I was no longer the barren one or the sold one. I was Mrs. Carmen, the teacher's assistant, known for my patience and kind smile. At home, the changes were also evident. Michael had stopped being hostile. One day, while helping him with a difficult math assignment, he looked at me intently and asked, "Is it true that you can't have children?" The question hit me like a punch. The family drama I had tried to leave behind resurfaced in a child's innocent curiosity. "Yes," I answered honestly after catching my breath. "The doctors say I never will be able to." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "But that doesn't make you less. You know, my mom always said that a person's worth comes from what they carry inside, not from what they can or can't do." Tears flowed without my being able to control them. This child who had rejected me so fiercely was now offering me the comfort my own family never gave. That night, while serving dinner, Mr. Alexander watched me with new intensity. When the children went to sleep, he asked me to sit with him on the porch. It was a clear night, the starry sky shone above us. "Michael told me about your conversation," he said after a long silence. "I'm sorry if it made you uncomfortable." "It didn't," I replied. "On the contrary, it made me feel accepted." Mr. Alexander turned toward me, his face partially illuminated by the light coming from the house. "I've never asked you directly, Carmen. Are you happy here?" The question took me by surprise. Was I happy? 3 months ago I would have answered with a resounding no. "I'm finding my place," I answered honestly, "and that's more than I ever expected." He nodded, satisfied with my response. "When I brought you here, I did it thinking only of my children. They needed a woman in the house, but now I see that you're much more than that. You've brought light to this house, Carmen." His words awakened something in me that I thought was dead. Hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, I could build a real life here, not just an existence of survival. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. My salary, although modest, gave me an independence I had never known. I saved every penny carefully, dreaming of a future where I wouldn't depend on anyone. The relationship with Mr. Alexander also evolved. We were no longer two strangers sharing a roof. We talked in the evenings, shared concerns about the children, and even laughed together occasionally. I discovered that behind his serious facade was an intelligent and considerate man, a man who respected my space and my decisions. However, the shadow of my past continued to lurk. My parents kept appearing in town trying to talk to me. My sister Lucy's illness was real. According to Mrs. Louise's confirmation, she was seriously ill, and the treatment was certainly expensive. One afternoon, while returning from school, my father intercepted me. He looked haggard, desperate. "Carmen, please. Lucy is getting worse. The doctors say without treatment she won't make it through winter. I beg you, talk to your husband." The plea from a man who had once been so proud should have given me satisfaction. I should have felt that revenge was beginning to materialize. But I only felt sadness. "Why don't you sell the land?" I asked. "The north plot is good. It would be worth enough." "We already tried," he replied with a defeated voice. "No one wants to buy it. The drought has made prices fall." Something in his story didn't add up. The north plot was the best land they owned. It had always given good harvests, drought or not. "And the savings you always bragged about keeping for emergencies?" My father looked away. "They're gone." He was lying. I knew him too well. There was something he wasn't telling me, something important. That night, while Mr. Alexander and I shared coffee after putting the children to bed, I told him about the encounters with my parents and my suspicions. "Do you trust me, Carmen?" he asked after listening to me attentively. "Yes," I replied without hesitation, surprised by how true my answer was. "Then let me investigate this. I have contacts in town. I can find out what's really happening." His offer moved me deeply. This man, who barely knew me a few months ago, was willing to help me unravel a mystery that might have nothing to do with him. A week later, Mr. Alexander returned with information that would change everything. He waited until the children were asleep and took me to the small study at the back of the house where he kept his documents and did his business accounts. "What I'm going to tell you won't please you," he warned, his expression grave. "Your sister is sick. That's true. But the money for her treatment existed. Your father received it a month ago as part of an inheritance from a distant uncle." My mind spun, trying to process this information. "Then why are they asking me for money?" Mr. Alexander took a deep breath before continuing. "Because your father lost that inheritance. He gambled it all on cockfights. Everything. And now he's desperate." The betrayal felt like a fresh stab. Not only had they sold me, but now they were trying to use me again, taking advantage of my compassion for my sister. "There's more," continued Mr. Alexander, his voice softening. "Your sister? She's pregnant, Carmen, 6 months. That's the real reason she needs special medical care." The irony was almost too much to bear. My sister, the same one who had mocked my infertility, was now expecting a child, and I, the defective one, was in a position to help her or not. "What do you want to do?" asked Mr. Alexander, gently taking my hand. It was the first time he had touched me like that, and despite the situation, I felt a comforting warmth. "I don't know," I confessed. "Part of me wants to turn my back on them like they did to me, but another part thinks about that innocent baby, about my nephew or niece." Mr. Alexander nodded understandingly. "Take your time to decide. Whatever your choice, I'll support you." That night, while lying awake, I reflected on the turns of fate. I, who could never have children of my own, now had the responsibility of caring for 4 children who weren't mine, by blood, but whom I was beginning to love as if they were. And now I held in my hands the fate of a 5th child, one not yet born, but who shared my blood. The next morning brought an unexpected revelation. Anna, the little one, came running into the kitchen while I was preparing breakfast. "Look, look!" she exclaimed excitedly, holding a small bundle in her hands. "I found it in the barn. It was a puppy, so small it fit in her palms. It was trembling, clearly hungry and scared. It's Mama isn't there, Anna explained sadly. I looked everywhere. Can we keep it, please? I looked at that tiny life, abandoned and vulnerable, and something broke inside me. Suddenly, I knew what I had to do. That same day, after classes, I went to my parents' house. My mother opened the door, surprised to see me there by my own will. I'll help Lucy, I announced without preamble but with my conditions. The relief on her face was instant but tensed upon hearing the word conditions. What conditions? Asked my father, appearing behind her. I'll pay the doctor directly, not you, and I want to talk to Lucy alone now. They hesitated but finally agreed. My sister was in her old room, the one we once shared. She was pale, emaciated, her belly bulging, contrasting with her thinness. Upon seeing me, her eyes filled with tears. Carmen, she whispered, I didn't think you'd come. I sat beside her, observing this woman who had been my playmate in childhood before age and family expectations separated us. Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? I asked directly. She lowered her gaze, ashamed. Because after how I treated you when we found out about yours, I felt like a hypocrite. Her honesty disarmed me. I didn't expect repentance from her. The father, she began, but I interrupted her. I didn't need to know that story now. I'm going to help you, Lucy, for the baby, and because despite everything, you're still my sister. Her tears flowed freely. Then, between sobs, she told me how her parents had reacted upon learning of her pregnancy outside marriage, how they had threatened to throw her out of the house, just like they did to me, but her illness had stopped them, how the inheritance money had initially been destined for her treatment but disappeared mysteriously, with our father blaming failed investments. I never believed the investment story, she confessed. Dad has always had problems with gambling, but Mom refuses to see it. When I left the room, my parents waited anxiously. I explained my terms. I would pay for Lucy's treatment, but when she recovered, she would come live with me at the Mendoza Ranch, at least until the baby was born. And then what? Asked my mother, scandalized. Do you intend to keep the baby? Is that it? Steal your sister's child because you can't have your own? Her accusation hurt me but no longer had the power to destroy me. No, Mother. I intend to give my sister and her child a chance at a dignified life, away from the toxicity of this house. My words fell like stones in a quiet pond. My father, furious, began to shout, but I ignored him. I had already said everything I had to say. My decision was made. Upon returning to the ranch, I found Mr. Alexander on the porch waiting for me. The children were already asleep. Without saying a word, I sat beside him and rested my head on his shoulder, a gesture of intimacy we had never allowed ourselves before. Surprisingly, he didn't pull away. Instead, he put his arm around my shoulders, offering me the silent comfort I so needed. Lucy will come live with us when she's better, I finally said. She and her baby. Mr. Alexander nodded, as if he had already anticipated it. This house has plenty of room, and the children will be delighted to have a baby around. I looked at him, overwhelmed by his understanding. Why do you do this? Why do you help me so much? His gaze met mine, and for the first time I saw something more than kindness in his eyes. I saw a deeper, more complex feeling. Because I'm getting to know you, Carmen, and what I see, I like. His honesty left me speechless. We remained like that in silence under the starry sky, while a new possibility opened before us, a possibility I had never considered, that this arranged marriage, born of desperation and humiliation, could transform into something real, something based on mutual respect and, perhaps, with time, on love. That night, while preparing for sleep, I looked at my reflection in the small mirror in my room. I no longer saw the broken and souled young woman. I saw a woman finding her strength, her purpose, her path toward redemption. The puppy Anna had found slept in a basket next to my bed. We had called it Hope, a name that now resonated deeply in my heart. Winter arrived with force in rural Texas. Snow covered the roads, making transit between town and the ranch difficult. Despite the cold, my heart felt warmer than ever. Lucy had been with us for 2 weeks. Her treatment was working, and although she was still weak, her improvement was evident. Her belly grew day by day, and the children, especially Anna, were fascinated with the idea of an upcoming baby. Mr. Alexander had prepared a special room for her, the sunniest in the house. At first, Lucy was shy and withdrawn, as if expecting rejection or reproach. But gradually she began to relax, to smile more, to integrate into our family routine. One night, while we knitted together in front of the fireplace, she confessed to me, "I never thought you'd accept me like this after everything I put you through." I set down my knitting and looked at her directly. "We're sisters, Lucy, despite everything." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know, and I regret it so much. When Dad and Mom said they would marry you to Mr. Alexander, I did nothing to stop it. I was even glad, thinking it was what you deserved for being different." "And now?" I asked, feeling a pang of pain at the memory. "Now I see that I was the one who was wrong. You've built something beautiful here, Carmen. A real family. These children adore you, and Mr. Alexander..." She stopped with a knowing smile. "He looks at you like you're the moon and stars." I blushed intensely. My relationship with Mr. Alexander had evolved subtly in recent months. We shared more time together. Our conversations had become more intimate, and sometimes when I thought he didn't notice, I caught him watching me with an expression that made my pulse race. We continued sleeping in separate rooms, but something had changed. One night, after everyone had retired, Mr. Alexander asked me to accompany him to his study. He seemed nervous, something unusual for him. Carmen, there's something I must confess to you, he began, inviting me to sit across from him. When I brought you here, I wasn't completely honest with you. My heart stopped for an instant. What could he be hiding from me? I told you I needed someone to take care of my children, and it's true. But there was something more. He took a deep breath before continuing. I chose you specifically. Me? I asked, confused. Why? You didn't even know me. I had seen you in town many times, always so gentle, so patient with the children you encountered. Once, I saw you share your lunch with an elderly man begging in the plaza. Another time, I watched you help a woman with her packages during a storm. I remembered those moments, small acts of kindness that for me were natural. I never imagined anyone noticed them, much less him. When my wife Elena died, I was devastated. The children needed a mother, but I couldn't stand the idea of replacing her with just anyone. I wanted someone special, someone with a genuinely good heart. And then you found out about my condition? I asked, guessing the rest. He nodded, shamefacedly. I heard your parents in the plaza arguing about what to do with you. Your father mentioned seeking me out, knowing I was looking for a wife. Not for what you think, but for my children. So, you went to see them? Yes. But they didn't know I had already observed you for months. I paid what they asked, not because I believed you were worth that price, but because I knew it was your ticket out of that house. The revelation left me speechless. All this time, thinking I had been bought as defective merchandise, when in reality I had been chosen. Why are you telling me this now? I managed to ask. Mr. Alexander, as I had begun to call him in my thoughts, got up and walked around the desk until he stood in front of me. Because I can no longer keep pretending this is just a convenient arrangement, Carmen. Because every day that passes it becomes harder for me not to tell you what I feel. He knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. His eyes, always so serene, now shone with an emotion that took my breath away. I'm falling in love with you, Carmen. Not as the mother of my children, but as the woman you are. Strong, compassionate, brave. I'm not asking for anything, I just wanted you to know. Without thinking, I leaned down and pressed my lips against his. It was a soft, tentative kiss, but loaded with feeling. When we separated, we were both trembling. I'm falling in love with you too, Alexander, I confessed in a whisper, and it terrifies me. Why? He asked, caressing my cheek. Because I never thought it would be possible. Not for me. Not after everything. After everything is exactly when true love finds its way, he replied with a wisdom that moved me. That night, we didn't sleep separately. We didn't consummate our marriage. Both felt we needed time, that this new feeling deserved respect and patience. But we held each other all night, sharing stories, fears, dreams. For the first time since arriving at the Mendoza Ranch, I felt completely at home. The morning brought a clear, cold day and with it, an unexpected visit. My parents appeared at the door, their faces tense, their gazes avoiding mine. We've come to see Lucy, announced my mother, as if it were her right. And the baby, added my father. It's our grandchild, after all. I felt Alexander tense beside me. I knew what he was thinking. These were the same parents who had sold me without remorse, who had tried to manipulate me, who had betrayed my trust again and again. Lucy is resting, I replied calmly. The doctor recommended absolute rest at this stage. We're her parents, insisted my mother. We have the right to see her, like you had the right to sell me? The words escaped before I could contain them. An uncomfortable silence settled. My father, always arrogant, took a step forward. I won't allow my daughter and my grandchild to live under the same roof as her, he said, pointing at me with contempt. She has a name, intervened Alexander, his voice hard as steel. It's Carmen Mendoza, my wife, and she's in her house. You are the guests here. My father reeled with rage. Lucy will come with us right now. We've already prepared everything for her return. The family drama was reaching its climax. Michael, who had been listening from the hallway, suddenly appeared at my side. Aunt Lucy doesn't want to leave, he said firmly, surprising me by calling her aunt for the first time. She told us so last night. This is not children's business, snapped my mother, visibly irritated. It's this family's business. Michael replied, standing as tall as he could. And Carmen and Aunt Lucy are part of our family now. His words filled me with inexplicable pride. This child who had rejected me so fiercely now defended me as part of his family. I'm going to get Lucy, announced my father, trying to enter the house. Alexander stood in his way, imposing. You won't take another step inside my house without my permission. The tension was palpable. For a moment I feared the situation would turn violent, but then a soft voice interrupted us. What's happening here? Lucy had appeared in the hallway, her figure wrapped in a blanket, her face pale but determined. Lucy, thank God, exclaimed my mother, trying to approach her. We've come to take you home. My sister took a step back instinctively. I am home, Mama. No, dear, intervened my father with false sweetness. Your place is with us. We're your family. Lucy looked at me, then at Alexander, and finally at Michael, who remained firmly at my side. My place is where I feel safe, she replied with a strength I hadn't seen in her before, where my baby and I are respected. And that's here with Carmen and her family. The word her resonated like an echo. For Lucy, I was no longer the discarded daughter of the Garcia family. I was Carmen Mendoza, with a family of my own. It's that man, isn't it? Accused my mother, pointing at Alexander. He's brainwashed you, like he did with Carmen. Lucy shook her head. Tired. No one has brainwashed me, Mama. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing things clearly. How you treated Carmen, how you treated me when you found out about my pregnancy, and now, how you're trying to manipulate me to return? We just want what's best for you, insisted my father. No, Lucy replied firmly. You want the baby because it represents a second chance for you, a chance to have the grandchild that Carmen can never give you. Her words fell like a hammer, exposing the crude truth we had all avoided mentioning. And what's wrong with wanting a grandchild? My mother defended herself. It's natural. What's not natural is discarding a daughter because she can't give you what you want, Lucy replied, her voice breaking slightly. Carmen didn't choose to be infertile just as I didn't choose to get sick, but you treated her as if she were less valuable because of it. You sold her to the highest bidder. We sold her qualities, my father protested weakly, her skills as a housewife, as a caregiver. You sold me, I interrupted, finding my voice finally, like cattle is sold. And now, when you see that I found happiness despite you, when you see that Lucy is better here than with you, you can't stand it. My father took a step toward me, threatening, but Alexander interposed again. That's enough, he said with authority. I'll ask you to leave my property now. Not without my daughter, screamed my mother, trying to approach Lucy. I won't go with you, exclaimed Lucy, backing up until she hit the wall. Suddenly, her face contorted in a grimace of pain, and she doubled over, clutching her belly. Lucy! I ran to her, holding her as she collapsed. The baby, she whispered between gasps. Something's wrong. It hurts so much. My parents' betrayal had triggered a crisis. Within seconds, Alexander had lifted Lucy in his arms and was carrying her to her room while I ran to get the doctor. Michael stayed at the door, preventing my parents from entering. The following hours were a blur of anguish and worry. The doctor, an older, experienced man, worked tirelessly to stabilize Lucy and save the baby. My parents waited on the porch, refusing to leave, while Alexander organized the children to keep them calm and occupied. Finally, near dawn, the doctor came out of the room, his face grave but not defeated. Both are stable, he announced. But it's been very risky. The young lady needs absolute rest until the end of pregnancy. Any disturbance could cause premature labor, and in her condition it would be extremely dangerous. I looked at my parents, who had entered the house upon hearing the doctor. Did you hear? I said, my voice loaded with accusation. Your intervention almost cost Lucy and the baby their lives. My mother paled, but my father maintained his stubbornness. All the more reason she should come with us. We can take better care of her. The doctor, who had known my family for years, unexpectedly intervened. With all respect, Mr. Garcia, I've observed the care Miss Lucy receives here. She has a clean, sunny room, adequate nutrition, constant attention. I don't see how she could be better elsewhere. You don't understand, protested my father. She's my daughter, and she's receiving the best possible care, the doctor replied firmly. As a professional, I would recommend that she not be moved at all. The revenge that life had prepared for my parents unfolded before my eyes. They, who had wanted to control our lives, who had sold me for considering me defective, now faced the reality that they had lost both daughters. My mother began to cry, a heartbreaking cry that moved me despite everything. For a moment, I saw in her not the woman who had betrayed me, but a desperate mother trying not to lose her last daughter. Can they visit her? I said finally, surprising myself. But with conditions. They'll come when I tell them. They'll stay as long as I determine and leave without protests when I indicate. Alexander looked at me with surprise but nodded in support. My parents, defeated, accepted my terms. When they left, dawn was beginning to tint the sky pink. That was very generous of you, Alexander commented when we were alone. I didn't do it for them, I confessed. I did it for Lucy and for me. I don't want to become what they are, people incapable of forgiving, of seeing beyond their own pain. He drew me to him and hugged me tightly. You're extraordinary, Carmen Mendoza, and every day I feel more fortunate to call you my wife. In that moment, exhausted but together, we sealed our love with a kiss that promised a future different from the past we had both suffered. The following weeks were of adaptation and growth. Lucy recovered slowly while her belly grew healthy and strong. My parents kept their word, visiting her with the frequency and duration I established. They were tense visits at first, but gradually something began to change. One afternoon I found my mother sitting next to Lucy, knitting together a small hat for the baby. Her hands, always so skillful with the needle, worked with love in each stitch. Upon seeing me, she stopped, uncomfortable. It's beautiful, I commented, referring to the hat. Thank you, she replied almost timidly. I wanted to make something for my grandchild. There was a pause loaded with meaning. You could also make something for Alexander's children, I suggested, surprising myself. Winter is being hard, and Michael has grown so much that his gloves no longer fit. My mother looked at me, a spark of hope in her eyes. Would you let me make something for them? I nodded, feeling something untie inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a beginning, a possibility of building something new on the ruins of the past. My father was a more difficult case. His wounded pride kept him distant, especially from Alexander. But one day, an emergency forced him to show a different facet. A strong snowstorm had blocked the roads. My father, who had come to visit Lucy, was forced to stay at the ranch. That same night, Michael suddenly fell ill with a high fever. Alexander had gone to town for supplies and was trapped there by the storm. Only Lucy, confined to her bed, myself, my father, and the other children, scared by their brother's condition, were there. To my astonishment, my father took control of the situation. With an authority born from years of hard work, he prepared cold compresses for Michael, helped me give him medicine, and stayed awake all night watching his fever. I learned some things during the war, he explained briefly when I asked about his medical knowledge. Sometimes there were no doctors available. It was a facet of him I had never known, a man capable of caring, of worrying about someone who wasn't his blood. The next morning, when Michael's fever finally broke, I found my father asleep in a chair next to his bed, his hand resting protectively over the boys. Something stirred inside me, a deeper understanding that people are complex, contradictory, capable of cruelty and kindness at the same time. When Alexander managed to return 2 days later, he found my father in the workshop repairing a broken table. They worked in silence, side by side, a tacit understanding emerging between them. They weren't friends, probably never would be, but there was a new respect born from unexpected circumstances. As winter gave way to spring, I felt that something was also blooming inside me. My relationship with Alexander deepened each day. Our nights together were a constant discovery, not only of our bodies but of our souls. He taught me that being infertile didn't make me less of a woman, less worthy of pleasure and love, and I taught him that opening his heart again after losing his wife wasn't a betrayal to her memory but a tribute to the life she would have wanted for him. And so, on a sunny April afternoon, when the fields began to green and the first flowers appeared, Lucy gave birth to a beautiful girl. It was a difficult birth, as the doctor had anticipated, but mother and daughter survived thanks to the care received during those months. When I held my niece in my arms for the first time, I felt an emotion so deep it left me breathless. She was small, perfect, with a mop of black hair and the same dark eyes as Lucy. "I want to call her Carmen," announced Lucy, weak but radiant, "for the woman who saved us both." Tears ran down my cheeks without my being able to stop them. This small life, who bore my name, represented a kind of redemption, a new beginning for our family. My parents arrived the next day anxious to meet their granddaughter. My mother cried upon holding her in her arms, and my father, that hard man who never showed emotion, had to turn away to hide his tears. It was in that moment, seeing my family gathered around this new life, that I understood that true revenge doesn't consist of returning the pain received but in finding happiness despite it, in building something beautiful on the ashes of what was destroyed. Little Carmen united what seemed irreparably broken. She didn't erase the past nor justify my parents' actions, but offered a bridge toward a future where the wound could perhaps heal. Summer brought with it a suffocating heat wave and significant changes in our lives. Lucy, completely recovered from childbirth, had begun working with me at the school. She had a natural gift for teaching, and the children adored her. Little Carmen, now 3 months old, was the center of everyone's attention, especially Anna's, who had proclaimed herself her official protector. My relationship with my parents continued to be complex but was no longer loaded with bitterness. They came regularly to see Lucy and the baby, and although conversations were sometimes tense, there was a genuine effort on both sides. My mother had even begun bringing small gifts for all the children, not just for her granddaughter. One afternoon, while returning from school, Lucy confessed something that would again change the course of our lives. "I've received a letter," she said, her voice mixing nervousness and hope. "From Frank." Frank was the father of her daughter, a young teacher who had passed through our town the previous year, and with whom Lucy had had a brief but intense romance. He had left before knowing about the pregnancy, promising to return, but none of us really believed it possible. "He's in New York City," she continued. "He got a position at an important school there. He wants to meet his daughter, Carmen, and wants us to go with him." The news hit me hard. I had imagined Lucy and little Carmen as a permanent part of our family. The idea of losing them caused me acute pain, but I also understood that my sister deserved her chance at happiness. "What did you tell him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Carmen, you and Alexander have done so much for us. I don't know if I can just leave." I took her hands in mine. "If you love him and he's willing to be a father to your daughter, you should give him a chance. But what about you and our parents? I'll be fine. I have Alexander, the children, and regarding our parents, maybe it's for the best. A new beginning for everyone." Tears shone in her eyes. "I'm scared, Carmen. What if it doesn't work? What if he rejects us when he sees the child? Then you'll come back here," I replied firmly. "This will always be your home." That night, I shared the news with Alexander. His reaction was similar to mine, sadness mixed with understanding. "We should invite this Frank to come first," he suggested. "He'll meet the child here, where Lucy feels safe. That way we can evaluate his intentions." As always, his sensibility impressed me. We wrote to Frank, extending the invitation, and 2 weeks later, a tall, thin young man with glasses and a nervous expression arrived at our door. The reunion between Lucy and Frank was moving. They looked at each other as if they couldn't believe the other was real. And when he saw little Carmen for the first time, he fell to his knees, overwhelmed by emotion. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently caressing his daughter's cheek like her mother. During the following days, we carefully observed Frank. He was polite, considerate, and clearly in love with both Lucy and the baby. He spoke openly about his plans, about the house he had rented in New York City, about the school where he worked, and about his desire to form a real family. "I want to marry Lucy," he confessed to Alexander and me one night after everyone had retired. "If she'll accept me and if you give your blessing." Alexander looked at him seriously. "And if Lucy decided to stay here, would you be willing to settle in our small town?" Frank didn't hesitate. I'd go wherever she went. My work is important, but she and my daughter are more important. We exchanged a glance, satisfied with his answer. The next day, when Frank formally asked for Lucy's hand, she accepted through tears of happiness. The news was received with mixed reactions. The children were devastated at the idea of losing their aunt and the baby. My parents surprisingly showed reservations. New York City! Exclaimed my mother, horrified. It's so far! How will we see our granddaughter? You can visit us, Frank offered kindly, and we'll come for the holidays. We don't want to separate you. My father, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. Will you take good care of her, both of them? Frank held his gaze firmly. With my life, sir. Something in the young man's sincerity seemed to satisfy my father, who nodded slightly. The wedding was celebrated 2 weeks later, a simple but beautiful ceremony in the small-town church. Unlike my own wedding, this one was filled with love, laughter, and good wishes. Lucy radiated in a simple white dress, and Frank couldn't take his eyes off her. Little Carmen, in Anna's arms, watched everything with curious eyes. While I watched them exchange vows, I felt deep gratitude. My sister, who had once mocked my infertility, now considered me her greatest support. My parents, who had sold me without remorse, now treated me with cautious respect that could, with time, become something warmer. And Alexander, the man who had bought me, turned out to be the most generous of husbands, the most loving of companions. Life had a twisted sense of humor, but also a strange way of balancing things. After the ceremony, while the celebration continued, my father took me aside. He seemed uncomfortable, as if words cost him physical effort. Carmen, he cleared his throat. Your mother and I have been thinking. The house is empty now without you two, and we're too old to manage it alone. I didn't understand where he was going. We've decided to sell it, he continued. And we'd like to give you your share, you and Lucy. It's only fair. I looked at him, astonished. My father talking about fairness, offering money without being asked. We know it doesn't fix anything, he added, avoiding my gaze. What we did, it can't be fixed, but maybe it's a beginning. I felt something untie inside me, a knot I had carried so long I had almost forgotten its weight. Thank you, Dad, I replied simply. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but as he had said, it was a beginning. When Lucy and Frank left for their new life, the farewell was painful, but full of hope. They promised to write regularly, send photographs, visit when possible, and they kept their word. Each month, letters arrived detailing their new life, accompanied by photographs of little Carmen growing. Life at the Mendoza Ranch found a new rhythm. The children grew, the school prospered, and Alexander and I deepened our love each day. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I wondered how my life would have been if my parents hadn't sold me, if I hadn't been diagnosed as infertile, if I had followed the path society expected of me. One day, while helping Michael with his studies, he now aspired to university, something unthinkable for a child of his social origin. He asked me a question that took me by surprise. Carmen, do you ever regret not being able to have children of your own? The question, innocent but deep, made me reflect. I looked around at the house we had built together, at the children I had helped raise, at the life I had forged from what seemed an unforgivable betrayal. I have children, I replied honestly, 4 of them. That they don't share my blood doesn't make them less mine. Michael smiled, satisfied with my answer. That's what I thought. I just wanted to be sure. That night, while Alexander and I contemplated the stars from our porch, a custom we had maintained throughout the years, I told him about the conversation with Michael. He's a good boy, he commented proudly. He has your intelligence and sensitivity, and your stubbornness, I added, laughing. We remained silent for a moment, enjoying the quiet night. You know, he said finally, sometimes I think it was destiny that we were meant to find each other, to form this family, despite how it all began. I looked at him, this man who had transformed my life in ways I never imagined possible. I don't believe in destiny, I replied. I believe in choices. You chose to bring me here. I chose to stay. We both chose to love each other, and those choices, not destiny, are what brought us here. Alexander drew me to him, kissing my forehead tenderly. Then I choose to keep loving you, Carmen Mendoza, today, tomorrow, and all the days we have left. And I replied, feeling my heart overflow with a happiness I once thought impossible for someone like me. The humiliation of being sold, my family's betrayal, the pain of knowing myself infertile. Everything had transformed not into revenge or bitterness, but into a full life rich in love and purpose. I, who was once considered defective, had found my worth in the eyes of a good man, in the affection of 4 children who called me mother, and in the strength I discovered within myself when I needed it most. And that, perhaps, was the sweetest revenge of all. 10 years have passed since that day when my parents sold me to a lonely lumberjack with 4 children, a decade that transformed the scared and humiliated young woman into the woman I am today, respected principal of the town school, beloved wife and mother of 4 young people, who, though they don't carry my blood, carry my heart. Michael, now 22, studies medicine at State University. When he returns for vacations, he brings with him stories from the city, new books, and a gleam in his eyes that fills me with pride. He'll be an excellent doctor, of that I have no doubt. James, 18, has inherited his father's skill with wood but has added his own artistic touch. His carvings are so beautiful that merchants from neighboring towns come specifically to buy them. Paul, at 16, is our dreamer, always with his nose buried in adventure books and maps of distant places. And Anna, my sweet Anna, at 14, shows a natural talent for teaching. Sometimes she comes with me to school and helps with the little ones just as I did when I began. Our ranch has prospered along with us. Alexander expanded his business, hiring other lumberjacks and establishing a carpentry workshop that produces fine furniture for clients throughout the region. Over the years, we've been able to improve the house, add comforts, and even build a small library that is my pride and joy. Lucy and Frank visit us regularly from New York City. Little Carmen, who's no longer so little at 10 years old, is the living image of her mother with the same luminous smile and determination. They have 2 more children now, Frank Jr., 7 years old, and Elena, 5. Every time they arrive, the house fills with laughter, stories, and the happy chaos that only children can create. The relationship with my parents has evolved in ways I never would have imagined. After selling their house, as they had announced at Lucy's wedding, they bought a smaller one in town within walking distance of ours. At first, visits were uncomfortable, marked by a past none of us could completely forget. But with time, especially after my father became seriously ill 3 years ago, something changed. I vividly remember the night Alexander came home with the news. My father had suffered a heart attack while working in his garden. He was in the small-town hospital and the doctors weren't optimistic. "You should go," Alexander said softly. "Regardless of everything, he's still your father." I went, with my heart divided between the resentment of the past and the concern of the present. I found my mother sitting next to the hospital bed, holding my father's hand, her eyes red from crying. "Carmen," she whispered when she saw me. "You came." Something in her voice, in the vulnerability she showed, broke the last barrier I had maintained around my heart. I sat on the other side of the bed and took my father's other hand. He was pale, thinner than I remembered, and breathing with difficulty. "I'm here, Dad," I said, surprised by the emotion in my own voice. His eyes opened slowly, focusing on me with effort. "Carmen," he murmured. "My little Carmen." "Not so little now, Dad," I replied, trying to smile. "No," he agreed with a weak smile. "A strong woman. You always were. I was the weak one." It was the first time I heard him admit a weakness, implicitly acknowledge the error he had committed. It wasn't a direct apology. My father had never been a man to ask for forgiveness openly, but in that moment, in that hospital room, it was enough. To the doctor's surprise, my father survived. The recovery was slow and difficult, but with each passing day, he seemed to not only regain physical strength but also something in his spirit. The near-death experience had changed him profoundly. One afternoon, while helping him walk through his garden as part of his rehabilitation, he made a confession I never expected to hear. "Carmen, I've been a proud man all my life, too proud to admit my mistakes, to ask forgiveness when I should." I stopped, surprised by the direction of the conversation. "What we did to you, what I did, has no justification. Selling you as if you were merchandise just because you couldn't have children was the most shameful thing I've done in my life." Tears ran freely down his cheeks, something I had never seen before. My father, the Iron Man, breaking before me. "The greatest revenge you could have taken was to succeed, Carmen, to build a beautiful life while we drowned in our own bad decisions. And still, when I was on the brink of death, you came. You held my hand as if I deserved your compassion." I was speechless, overwhelmed by the raw honesty I had never expected from him. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he continued. "Just that you know I regret it every day and that I'm proud of the woman you've become despite us, not thanks to us." That afternoon marked a before and after. It didn't erase the past, didn't completely eliminate the pain, but it opened a door towards something new. My father in the following years became a devoted grandfather to Lucy's children and a constant presence in Alexander's children's lives, who accepted him with the natural generosity of the young. My mother, always more adaptable, found her place as a sewing teacher at the school, sharing her skills with a new generation. I see her sometimes watching the girls as they learn to embroider, and I recognize in her eyes the same pride I feel when my students master a difficult lesson. Life has strange ways of balancing accounts. The humiliation I suffered, my family's betrayal, the family drama that marked my youth. Everything transformed into the foundation upon which I built an existence richer and fuller than I ever imagined possible. Last week, while reviewing old papers in the study, I found our marriage document, my name and Alexander's, united by a contract that began as a transaction but became the most authentic act of love. I held it in my hands, remembering that scared young woman who walked to the altar in a gray dress without hopes or dreams. "What did you find?" asked Alexander, entering silently and placing his hands on my shoulders. "Our beginning," I replied, showing him the paper. He took it carefully, observing the faded signatures. "An unconventional start, I must admit." I laughed softly. "Do you ever regret having brought me here like that?" He turned me to look at him directly, his eyes as sincere as always. "I regret the method, not the result. I should have found another way to rescue you from that house, one that wouldn't humiliate you. But never, not for a moment, have I regretted that you're in my life." In those words, I found the echo of a truth that had guided us. The path had been torturous, marked by pain and betrayal, but it had led us exactly where we needed to be. That night, after dinner, I observed our family gathered in the living room. Michael had returned from university for the weekend and was animatedly recounting his experiences in the city. James was showing Paul and Anna his latest carving project. Alexander listened to everyone, occasionally interjecting with a question or comment. The scene exuded a daily normalcy that filled me with gratitude. "What are you thinking about?" asked Alexander when we finally retired to our room after everyone had gone to sleep. "About revenge," I replied, surprising him. About how true revenge isn't returning the pain but overcoming it, transforming it into something beautiful. He nodded, understanding. You're the most skilled alchemist I know, Carmen Mendoza. You've turned lead into gold. I smiled at the metaphor. I didn't do it alone. You, the children, even Lucy and my parents in their way, all were part of that transformation. But you were the catalyst, he insisted. Your strength, your capacity to love despite everything, that's what changed the course for all of us. I reflected on his words while preparing for sleep. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps my refusal to succumb to bitterness, my decision to keep opening my heart even after it was so deeply wounded, had created a space where healing could occur. Not just mine, but that of an entire family. The following week we received a letter from Lucy. Little Carmen had won a writing contest at her school. She included a copy of the winning story, a tale about a princess who couldn't have children but found her purpose saving abandoned children and creating a home for them. It reminds me of someone I know, Lucy wrote at the end of her letter. Someone who taught me that true family isn't defined by blood but by love. I kept that letter in my treasure box along with the drawings the children had made for me over the years, Alexander's love notes, and the small hat my mother had knitted for Michael during that winter of reconciliation. Sometimes, when the town is quiet and the ranch sleeps, I go out to the porch and contemplate the stars, just as I did that first night of uncertainty and fear. The same moon illuminates the landscape, but the woman observing it is so different. I'm no longer the young woman sold by her family, desperate and humiliated. I'm Carmen Mendoza, wife, mother, teacher, friend. A woman who found her worth not in what her body could or couldn't do, but in her heart's capacity to love and forgive. And if that's not the definition of a successful life, I don't know what could be. Last week we celebrated the school's 15th anniversary. It was a great party with the whole town participating. My parents were there, my mother helping with refreshments, my father telling stories to the smallest children. Lucy and her family had come especially for the occasion. And of course Alexander and our children, the center of my personal universe. At one point during the celebration, Mrs. Louise, now a venerable elderly woman but still sharp-minded, asked for silence to make a toast. To Carmen, she said, raising her glass, who taught us that even from the darkest circumstances, the brightest light can emerge. As everyone toasted, I looked at the faces around me. Dear faces, lives intertwined with mine in ways I never would have imagined possible. The path had been long and sometimes painful, but each step, even the most difficult ones, had led me exactly where I needed to be. My parents sold me for being infertile, it's true. But what I found at the lonely Lumberjack's ranch wasn't slavery, but freedom, not humiliation, but dignity, not the end of my possibilities, but the beginning of a life fuller than I had ever dreamed. And that's a truth no one can ever take from me. There are stories that aren't just stories, they're mirrors of life. If this one moved you, help us continue telling others that also deserve to be heard. Thank you very much and have an excellent day.